Hello, I'm John Molesky, and this is Wilson Center Now, a production of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. Today, we present for you our Southern Voices Network for Peacekeeping Scholars Roundtable. You're going to meet three of the participants in that program, hear about their research and a little bit about their experience while at the Wilson Center. Joining us today are Yared Debebe Yetena, who is coordinator for the Peace and Security Studies MA program at the University of Gondar in Ethiopia, Awet Kahsay, who is a Peace and Security PhD candidate at Addis Ababa University, and Sandra Tumwesigye, who is an advocacy and communications coordinator of the Women's International Peace Center based in Uganda. Welcome to the three of you. Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I should tell you, the Southern Voices Network for Peacekeeping is funded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and SVNP is a continent-wide network of 22 African policy and research institutes. They work alongside the Wilson Center's Africa program to bring African knowledge and insight to U.S., African, and international policy on peace building in Africa. All of our scholars have been engaged in work during their time here, and we're going to learn a little bit about each project. And Yared, let's go in the order of introduction, and we'll begin with you. Your research focused on tackling the challenges of peace building in the Eastern Nile basin, I should say. And this is a precursor to a lot of what we will see in the future on the planet, which is the precious resource of water as a source of conflict. Could you tell us about the situation and what the disputes are about?
Thank you very much. My research is on tackling the challenges of peace building in the Eastern Nile Basin from a regional security perspective approach. So I have collected the data and I have analyzed the data, and the major challenges that came up or that I found out includes, first one is on the Nile water governance, which is a major problem in the Eastern Nile Basin. And the second one is on border conflicts. And the third is on political instabilities, national political instabilities across the three major countries in the Eastern Nile Basin: Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. So if looking at the Nile dispute, the major problem in the Eastern Nile Basin, it has been one of the disputed resource in the Eastern Nile Basin due to lack of a cooperative agreement to manage and utilize the Nile waters equitably across the three riparian countries, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. These three countries are entirely dependent on the Nile waters. I would say more than 200 million people rely on the Nile waters. As a result, the Nile water has become a national security matter. And there have been there have been some talks and dialogues going on between the three countries, but still the talks and the dialogues have never bear some fruit and some solution to the problem. But still, they are under the auspices of the African Union. There is an ongoing negotiation or a trilateral talks between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. Since last year, the talks has stopped due to the internal political challenges in Sudan and Ethiopia, the war in Ethiopia, and the transition, the precarious transition in Sudan has led to the impasse for the trilateral talks. But it will definitely resume in the coming year or in the coming months. I hope so. And the second major problem in the Eastern Nile Basin is border dispute. Looking at Sudan, for example, Sudan is at odds with Egypt with the border of the Halab Triangle. And Sudan is also in conflict with Ethiopia over the Al-Fashaq territory. So these frontier governance are challenging the building of peace, viable peace in the Eastern Nile Basin, to say the least. And the third one is political instabilities. And looking at the post-2010, the Arab Spring, these three countries have undergone some kind of transition. So these transitions have never been easy. They were precarious, and some of the countries like Ethiopia and Sudan are still undergoing in this experience of transition to a more democratic more democratic state. So this is also the internal political challenges are also the major ones that are challenging the viable peace in the Eastern Nile Basin. So this is my research on the peace building challenges in the Eastern Nile Basin.
But no matter which dispute you focus on, you see asymmetrical power among the nations. Is there a particular onus on any of the countries to lead the way?
Of course, in the hydropolitics, there is a saying that, especially previous researchers, they pointed out that Egypt has dominated the Nile waters for the last 100 and so years. Maybe due to its strategic location, being at the end of the Nile waters, and due to other factors, Egypt has built on maintaining this natural right and historical rights narrative in the Eastern Nile Basin. So I would say asymmetric power relation governs the Eastern Nile Basin up to the point where Ethiopia started building the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which actually is considered as an area of opportunity for the three countries to work together. But also this Grand Renaissance Dam has challenged the existing hegemony of Egypt. Yeah.
So has your research resulted in any recommendations?
Of course. I have made some recommendations to tackle these challenges. The first one is it goes out to the African Union. The African Union as a continental organization should help these three countries to work out on their problems. And the African Union has already started or embarked on facilitating these trilateral talks with Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. So it should push these three countries to come to agreement. So these resources are resources and conflict resolution or these dispute resolutions are not easy. It will not, there is no quick fix, but talks will definitely result in some kind of solution. If these three countries, if they work out on their problems, definitely they will come up with their solution. So the African Union should take the lead in this case. And the second one is on border dispute, specifically as Sudan and Ethiopia are part of the IGAD region, the Intergovernmental Authority for Development. The IGAD should help these three countries, Ethiopia and Sudan, to resolve their boundary disputes through, for example, instituting some high-level commission that researches and like that research on the border, the boundary of the, specifically on the composition of the people, who are the people, and how can we move forward and create some kind of soft boundary that would help the citizens of Sudan and Ethiopia to continue farming in the area and get protection from the Sudan government and the Ethiopian government. And the last one goes out to the international community. So the international community should encourage cooperative development projects on the Nile, specifically cooperative water development projects such as investments in irrigation, agro-processing, and hydropower. I think it helps to mitigate tension, spread some kind of responsibility for water utilization. So these are my three recommendations to tackle the problem.
Thank you, Yared. We'll come back to you in a moment. Now I want to switch our focus to Awet's work on focused on exploring the role of traditional justice institutions in peace building, specifically the case of Gerab in Northeast Ethiopia, and you're finding that it's a predominant focus on international actors, mainly regional organizations, African Union, which Yared just mentioned, top down, and then what might be lost in the mix are some of the local indigenous institutions that could also play an important role. Explain that to our viewers, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my research revolves around traditional justice institutions in specifically in Northeast Ethiopia. But we all know, all of us know that there are so many traditional justice institutions in Africa. For example, in Ethiopia, there are more than 18 ethnic groups. Each ethnic groups have their own traditional justice institutions. So I try to show how traditional justice institution could be used in peace buildings in Africa. I should say a few things about the Grub traditional justice institutions. I think Grub traditional justice institutions are institutions found along the boundary between Tigray regional state and Afar regional state in northeast of Ethiopia. And in terms of in terms of religion, there is a difference between the two communities. There is also a difference in terms of economic livelihood. There is also in terms of that the Tigrayans are somehow highlanders and the Afars are somehow lowlanders. The Tigrayans are farmers, dominantly based their livelihood on farming, whereas the Afars are dominantly based their livelihood on, or they are somehow pastoralists. So the Grub traditional justice institutions are trying to prevent, manage, and resolve conflict between those two communities. Usually the conflict between the two communities is related to resource, like any other farmer and herder conflict in Africa. It's related to like grazing land or resource-related kinds of conflicts between the two communities. So the point in my research is that traditional justice institutions should not simply be involved in peace building because there needs to be a local ownership, or the liberal or hybrid kinds of peace are not important, or any other kind of argument. But my argument is that traditional justice institutions should be engaged in peace building because they have their own distinctive and special features, which is highly demanding in Africa. So some of the reasons why traditional justice institutions should be engaged in peace building with that. Number one, they are accessible. They are accessible in every corner of the continent. They are accessible. They are available in the east, west, or south, or central part of Africa. Number two, they are in a better position to understand the peace and conflict understanding of their communities. They are in a better position to explore the cause of the conflict and how the conflict can be solved. Thirdly, traditional justice institutions can serve their communities in terms of justice because they know what kind of justice could be served to the two communities. Particularly in the case study, there is a difference in terms of religion, a difference in terms of economy, a difference in terms of livelihood. So this traditional justice institution can simply handle the conflict between those two communities. So traditional justice institution could be could have a role on peace buildings in Africa. These are the few points in relation to traditional justice institutions.
This would be a good moment for me to inform our viewers that each of our scholars has participated in an event at the Wilson Center with other panelists diving even deeper into their work than we can do in this format today. And so if you'd like to access those events, if you just come to the Wilson Center and go to the Africa programs page and look at their past events, you'll be able to find those. They all took place just recently. And in the event that you took part in, Awet, part of the framing was that what we're talking about is an underappreciated tool. And I'm wondering about the why. Why consistently is there just this top-down approach that tends to either underutilize or underappreciate these other resources on the ground?
I think the reason why there is some underutilizations of traditional justice institution could be somehow there is a dominance of a dominant trend of peace buildings, usually promoted by regional organizations. Of course, sometimes it could be somehow challenging to involve traditional justice institution in every political kind of conflict. They can they can't simply be active in a conflict at the local level. So sometimes it could be challenging to engage them in some political kind of conflicts in a country. But I think the reason why traditional institutions are somehow underutilized or not really be seen in the peacebuilding approach is that probably there is a trend of ignoring traditional justice, or there is a trend of ignoring traditional justice institutions that they are not capable of, managing conflict in such situations. This could be the reason why traditional justice institutions are ignored in the peacebuilding approach.
And what's the best evidence that they're wrong in that case and that these groups are capable?
Yeah, in the case study, in the Garib traditional justice institutions have able to manage before 15 years in the locality, there was a conflict between the two communities in relation to resources, in relation to land demarcations, in relation to grazing kinds of lands. But when the traditional justice institutions have been involved in managing such kinds of conflicts in northeast of Ethiopia, there was no serious conflict for the last 15 and above kinds of years in the locality. So this is a good example to show that traditional justice institutions could solve inter-ethnic or inter-communal kinds of conflicts in such scenarios. So this could be a good example to show traditional institutions are capable of managing and resolving conflicts.
Excuse me. Thank you, Awet. Sandra's research is focused on refugee women's inclusion in peace agreements through a case study of South Sudanese women in West Nile, Uganda. Sandra, welcome, and tell us about your research.
Thank you. So my research, as you mentioned, is focused on refugee women, but specifically South Sudanese refugee women living in settlements in the West Nile region of Uganda. And it's focused on understanding the nature and extent to which they've been involved in participating in implementing the revitalized peace agreement in South Sudan. And I focus on Uganda because a large percentage of refugees from South Sudan are living in Uganda. Uganda hosts about 45% of the refugees, and a large percentage of the refugees in Uganda are women. And are women who are engaged in peace building in Uganda and who have an interest in contributing to, influencing peace and the future of their country in South Sudan. And that in addition, the agreement itself includes a commitment to inclusivity, to including women and to including South Sudanese regardless of their geographic location. Unfortunately, the research found that refugee women in the settlements are not sufficiently included. They don't have information about the implementation progress in the country. They don't have information about opportunities to join discussions on key issues. So, for example, around the permanent constitution that's going to be made, around the establishment of transitional justice mechanisms, or even around processes leading to the elections or ongoing preparations for the electoral processes. They also do not have access to communication channels that would keep them, abreast, or to platforms where they can, receive updates and give feedback to actors who are engaged in these different processes. It also found that when actors support refugees to link back to what's going on in their countries of origin, that it tends to be gender blind. So women are not always sufficiently included. And when a woman representative is included, that the process is not consultative enough. So other women are not consulted on what this representative shares with the other actors. And they also do not receive feedback when the representative returns from their engagement, with other implementation actors, which is a gap. And another sort of challenge that was identified were barriers that exist within their context. So, conceptual barriers about the capacities of women within the settlements, but also about the capacities of women, of refugee women among, public institutions and among the, duty bearers who have the task of ensuring that they're included. And also another challenge that the research unveiled was the lack of linkages between refugee women in settlements and actors, in countries. So be it refugee representatives or even women's rights organizations or women's rights coalitions who are engaging in these processes linked to implementing the agreement, but that there's no link between the two groups, and therefore, their participation is not sufficiently facilitated.
I have a couple follow-ups for you. One about Uganda as a primary destination for refugees. Why is that? Is it about geography, or is there more involved in why Uganda has been a landing spot for so many?
I think the most important factor is geography. So, for example, in 2013 and in 2016, the more recent periods of heightened conflict in South Sudan, a lot of the refugees crossed over the border into Uganda. And you will find that several refugees have either been refugees once or twice, or like multiple times. One, because of their geography, it's the closest. You're able to sort of walk across into the country, but also the refugee policy is favorable. So refugees live in settlements, so they don't necessarily live in traditional camps. They have the right freedom of movement. They're able to access public services, so health, education, and to receive, support and have a quality of life that is similar to, citizens in the hosting communities. So I think it's a combination of both, but I would say primarily it's like the geographical proximity.
And I want to also ask you about the bias that you identify, good old-fashioned sexism, right? Women being treated as lesser citizens in this engagement. How do you overcome that? And is it changing generationally?
So, I mean, I would hope that it's changing. And I would say in terms of how you address it, that there needs to be some short-term actions, but some more long-term work. So long-term work in terms of, education, challenging, mindsets and perceptions, but also short-term work in terms of questioning practices that sustain sexist attitudes and sexist actions. So the practices that translate into, for example, the agreement provides for a 35% quota for women's representation, but in practice, it does not translate into 35% of women being, engaged. And typically, it's because of, negative mentalities about, women's capacity or women's roles or women, or the value that women have to bring. So one is to hold those actors accountable, to deliver on the commitments that they have made, and also to deliver on the promise that they are contributing to durable peace, because we know from previous studies and from previous research that by including diverse women and including diverse women's voices, that we have higher chances of peace being sustained. We have higher chances of diverse conflict triggers and the causes of conflict being addressed. Peace processes have broader ownership and like stronger legitimacy. So we know that including women is beneficial for everybody. So we need to also hold decision makers accountable to say, if you're really committed to sustainable peace, then walk the talk and let us see more women involved in these processes. But in addition, we need sort of broader education and mindset change efforts that would serve for long-term purposes.
Are there champions for this excluded group? Are there leaders who are sensitive to this and who are making sure that the groups are held accountable when it comes to, say, the 35% quota?
I would say yes on the 35% quota, that there are several actors, including the US government, that there are several actors who are holding the stakeholders to the peace agreement accountable, who are sort of advocating and calling them to fulfill their commitment. But what we find is a gap is that because there's not sufficient action in fulfilling the 35% gap, that the focus is on getting these actors to do more in terms of including women broadly. But we know that women are not a homogeneous group. So in the process of saying, let us have a few more women, we end up losing out on like the support and attention that would go to refugee women specifically. So while indeed we have supporters of women's participation in peace processes and in decision making around peace and security in general, we don't have as much attention and support to the specific case of refugee women, and also highlighting the specific contributions that they have to make to long-term peace, and and their voice as a key constituency in these kinds of processes. So we could do with more champions.
Well, thank you for being one of those champions, and thanks to the three of you for sharing your work today. And now I want to transition from your specific work to your general experience. And one thing I'm curious about, did the three of you know each other in any capacity before your involvement in the Southern Voices for Peacebuilding Network and the Wilson Center's Africa program?
No, we
Not
met
really.
in Washington, D.C. for the first time.
And what has been the value for all of you to get to know each other and to compare notes and to share experiences?
Okay, I can go first. I think it has been particularly valuable to have somebody else who's still working in the area of peace building, but who has a different perspective, to be able to read your work, to share their perspectives, to reflect on specific elements. So to have that sounding board has been, valuable in enriching the analysis and, how I look at the problem, for instance.
Howard, Yared, what would you add?
Yeah, the same as Sandra, and there was a good experience of sharing between each others. We have tried to share our research to each other, and then there were comments from them on each specific kind of issues. There was also a kind of experience sharing whether on our country's experience also. That was also important, I think.
Yared, anything you want to add?
Yeah, the Wilson Center really gave us this platform for the three of us to work together, to share our experiences and insights, to read and comment and give our insights to a friend and receive their comments and feedbacks. So it is very enriching indeed.
And will you plan on staying connected via the network when you return to your home bases?
Sure. Yeah, we will.
And about the experience of being in Washington, D.C., beyond the interaction among the three of you and with the Wilson Center staff, what has been the benefit of doing your research here in the U.S. Capitol?
Being here at the Wilson Center were important for the two reasons. Number one, they had a better access in terms of the library. The library is full of resources here at the Wilson Center. We have enriched our researches using the different materials here at the Wilson Center. That's the first point. Second, I am in a better position to have exposure with policymakers, experts in the area, and different institutions around Washington, D.C. So the program at the Wilson Center helps me to have such exposures in Washington, D.C.
I echo Awet's response, and on the issue of being connected to policymakers and to other practitioners in the field. I think it has been particularly valuable to look at the problem from the perspective of an international actor, and from the US perspective, to discuss with other actors what the possibilities are for addressing the problem, and to expand the network of potential champions, as you say, for the issue that I'm focusing on, and just also to learn from examples from other countries. So that exposure to policymakers and practitioners has been, very valuable for translating from, just ideas to action in the area of focus for my research.
Well, believe me, you contribute as much as you take back. So it's been a pleasure to have all of you with us. My only regret is that it happened during the pandemic, and maybe we didn't have as much interaction as we would under normal circumstances. But, you're now part of the Wilson family. We hope you'll be back, and we hope to stay in touch. Thank you for today. Thank you for your term of service, and good luck as you return home and continue your important work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sandra, Awet, Yared, a pleasure.
We
hope you enjoyed this edition of Wilson Center Now, and that you'll join us again soon. Until then, for all of us at the center, I'm John Molesky. Thanks for being here.